everyone. So, yeah, I can't lie. As a manga reader, this episode felt like the apex of the Onigashima fight in the Wano arc. Because, just jumping right into the fucking deep end, we obviously gotta talk about the end of this episode with the Jinbei versus Who's Who fight. Specifically, where we not only establish that Who's Who is actually a former CP9 agent, one who apparently had been forgotten to history by the government, but we also learn through Who's Who himself that part of the reason for that is his failure to protect the gum fruit. That before Luffy ate it, Shanks actually stole the gum fruit from a government transport. And that, just that alone, it obviously raises so many questions, but believe me when I say, just this reveal in itself is only scratching the fucking surface of what this really means. It's way more than just, it's way more than what you think. And I will actually admit how this plays out from here, what this reveal means for later on in the story. I will say a lot of the anime has done slightly better at building this up a little bit better than the manga, in my opinion. Both are great, but I feel the anime is just that it's that slight little bit more context to things, and maybe obviously to the point of being a little too obvious, but yeah. But believe me when I say, from here on, this fight, Jinbei versus Who's Who, is gonna flip the entirety of One Piece on its head, for better or worse, as I learned from the revelations within caused a slightly split reaction among the fandom at the time with who was reading the manga. So it'll be interesting to see what anime onlys think and their take on this reveal. That's going to be interesting to see, what their thoughts are, what the thoughts are from fresh eyes who haven't read the manga. That being said, with Jinbei and Who's Who's fight seemingly getting top billing for next week's episode, it will be interesting to see how Toei approaches that episode, because I admittedly I had been talking about how I want a lot of these fights expanded a little bit, but when it comes to this fight itself, taking into perspective how important this fight is narratively, and they didn't do all that much different with the Ulti fight, and even the focus we do get in the fight in this episode, I don't actually expect them to do much more here. And in retrospect, the more I thought about it, I don't think I'd want them to, because it would just kind of screw up the whole tempo of the fight. But I don't know how much I'm gonna feel. But with that said, I don't know how much I'm gonna feel about the alternate route of just doing the whole thing of giving having the fight itself split among everything else. I guess, I don't know. With that said, one thing I definitely think the anime is doing better than the manga, though, is and it's especially in this episode, is expanding upon a little bit more and seeing the tide turn in the battle, and seeing those of Kaido's crew who have eaten Tama's Kibidango respond to her outcry and switch sides, which, I'm not gonna lie, while it is obviously there to pad time, I think this is a case of me liking something more in the anime than the manga, because something about the way it's handled here just feels more satisfying. And I think it's that thing of just seeing more of an emphasis on this is, it emphasizes this is what you fucking get for underestimating Luffy, his crew, and even Tama herself. Now, granted, that also kind of has an opposite effect. Because if they had gotten a hold of her on her way back then, things might have been differently had you just actually taken Tama hostage. But now that her power is being used, is biting you in the ass. And I will admit, a lot of my fellow manga readers have a lot of problems with this arc, and have a lot of innate small problems with this arc. And but for me personally, the one problem that really gets to me nowadays, the more I think about it, is how Tama and her powers are narratively treated in this arc. That is the one thing that is a little wonky for me personally, because when you really look at how Tama's powers are treated within the narrative of Wano, her powers are treated with such importance early on into this arc, and they do end up being very important at this point in the story. But here's the problem. There's that middle section of Wano where that importance doesn't really feel like it's being treated with a sense of urgency on the part of Kaido or his crew. Like, it doesn't feel like Tama is consistently under that threat of being captured. And in context, it does make what happens here feel like a huge oversight on Kaido's part. Like, here's the thing, I know with Kaido, it's a constant thing where the man is so prideful that he feels like that he's all-powerful without anything to fear, including being defeated. And don't get me wrong, all of that is true. Kaido is an unstoppable force of nature. But still, letting Tama go unchecked is something that, in hindsight, needed a little bit more of attention in my mind. Because, like, in my mind, one thing that has been kind of like stirring around in my mind of how this problem could be fixed is in that whole middle section, change it up to where Tama is taken captive. She pretty much is taken to Onigashima, in the same way that pretty much Momonosuke was. But while she's there, have her take proactive measures. While she's captive, like, have her put on the facade that yes, she will do as she says, but under the secret, but while doing so, while feeding her Kibidango to pretty much the other to all the gifters, have it to where she says, when I give the order, attack Kaido and the crew and the other members of his crew, or something to that effect, something that where it shows that Tama is still in danger, but have it lead into how things ultimately end up in this climax. Like, again, it's just a little bit of narrative reworking in order to make the danger, in order to make that whole danger of Tama being captured like have a little more importance to it, I guess you could say. Although I will say, because as it stands, for as satisfying as it is to see Tama's abilities bite the Animal Kingdom pirates in the ass, it does take a little bit of a suspension of disbelief as it's presented. Although I do have to give small props to Queen for actually figuring things out and taking the proactive move to actually try and kill her. Like that, I will give credit to. That was actually pretty good on King's part, even though he ultimately ended up getting his ass handed to him by Sanji ultimately, which I do like how Sanji is kind of like, I do like how, like, we basically learned that that Queen was part of Mads, and that's how he knows Judge and all that shit, which we obviously knew, otherwise he wouldn't, which is kind of obvious, like, there wouldn't be any other way they would have met. Although you can tell just that fact alone is really getting under Sanji's skin. Like, Sanji's really getting annoyed by it, and believe it or not, that is something that does play on later with how this fight plays out. But yeah, obviously one of the things we also learned though is the side effects of the Rumble Ball now has arguably an even greater risk to Chopper than before, which is that he actually shrinks down even more to infant size, meaning he can't fight anymore for presumably he's incapable of fighting at all. Like, he doesn't even have the strength to do so. He doesn't have the physical strength or the health or the emotional or he doesn't have the health-wise strength in order to keep moving. All the while attending to Zoro, where we learn his life Zoro's life force is draining from him. And yeah, I don't think I'm spoiling anything too major at this point, but you can see this is obviously setting up for Zoro to get back into action and to basically fight King. Like, it's going to be a Zoro versus King, in the same way it's Sanji versus Queen, it's going to be Zoro versus King. And honestly, that fight in itself is something I do hope we get expanded on a little bit, because there's a real out of this fucking world moment with Zoro during that fight that really just kind of gets dropped and without explanation. Now, to be fair, I think with the way that with what we also learned in this episode with Miyagi like saying that the way to revive Zoro is through a drug that can allow him to, in order to fight at full capacity. It is one of those things that does, in retrospect, make me think that yeah, it might have something to do with the drug, but yeah, it's one of those things where I don't know what happened in that what happened in that moment at the end of near the end point of the fight with King just kind of happened. With that said, art and animation of this week was pretty damn good, although you can tell where they really wanted to put the focus in this episode, which is the whole Sanji versus Queen fight. That whole bit made this episode absolutely fucking bonkers. And you can tell that the one thing that the animators really love doing are transformation scenes. Like, you can tell that for them is like where they love focusing what they love about episodes like this. They love to do those. They love to put the budget in those transformation scenes most of all. Like the action scenes obviously too, but they love to put it into those transformation scenes as well, obviously. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to hit the notification bell, subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of the Night, signing off. Later, everyone.